始，加油！
We're here to report back on our week with Paul and to see how he's done this week, to show you some of the things we've been doing. You know, one of our main focuses with Paul was to really focus on his responding and learning how to learn, of like paying attention, keeping his hands to himself, these really core skills that will help him to access what we want to teach him. If you remember last time I talked about how he's spending a lot of time fidgeting, and that was kind of an issue. One of the things we did early on is we started to have some contingencies around having him keep his hands to himself.
好得意嘅嘢，你好想搞，但係等先，手放好，係啦。嗱，我哋呢度有個規矩嘅喎，同老師上堂嘅時候咧，你要做咩啊？手放好，係啦。如果唔掂嗰啲就叫做手放好啦。
You can see in this video, Nicole deliberately puts lots of attractive things on the table to tempt him to touch them and play with them, and reinforces him to keep his hands to himself. We were on the first day, like we were using just like a token economy, and you may see a little bit of that token economy as we go through this week, but we faded it fairly quickly. But this was a good way for him to understand what he was supposed to do.
你記唔記得要手放好同埋要點樣啊？望住老師係啊，我隨時要同佢講嘢㗎啦，叻仔喎 ！Yes。
He's really good with his hands. He learned that skill very, very quickly, and he was able to keep himself to himself pretty much most of the time in all of the other lessons. As soon as he clicked it, he was really good to follow those kinds of rules, which was really, really good. And it helped him a lot because we didn't have to worry about what he was doing with his hands or what he's wobbling on the chair. Now, as you remember, we also had to work on his ability to sort of respond to people and listen to what people were saying. And so that's been a theme all week. But I wanted to share with you again one of the final clips of, you know, we're in a natural setting again. He's playing Mario Kart, one of his favorite things to do. Nicole is sat there and you can see she gives him some instructions. She talks with him. He's very responsive to answering her questions, following her directions.
佢叫咩名啊 ？Mario 啊，係啊。
And is quite happy. There's no token economy or unnatural reinforcement being used. And it was good to see him being able to participate in his more, you know, natural environment.
你中唔中意 Benz 啊？好中意 Benz 啊！誒，你幫我攞遙控嚟啊！我諗較大聲啲啊！啊，唔該 ，thank you。
Now, more difficult was to work on his attending, and we were trying to think of his attending in a number of ways. His attention in maybe a sort of more school-based setting, his attention in our one-on-one, and how are we going to develop some programming around that, and what should we do to help him to learn to pay better attention and develop that really important learning how to learn skill. So one of the programs we did is a program that we call Slapjack, but it's really a program that's orientated around him paying attention to materials as we go through the lesson. This is like at the very beginning, and you can see that Nicole is trying to teach him one of these pictures on the board. You need to give me or touch the card that's in front of you. So he needs to do a couple of things. One is he has to be aware of the cards he has and how they correlate to what Nicole is going to point at. It's actually a very simple task for him, but why it's difficult is because Nicole doesn't always point. She might wait, pause, she might hover, she might point at a card that isn't what he's got. She might talk for a little period of time, and so the longer we talk, the more he may get distracted, the more cards he has to manage, the more difficult it is, the more things on the board, the more he has to pay really, really good attention. So this is an example from the beginning of the week as us beginning to teach that skill. So you can see in the final video at the end of the week, and we did this in lots of different formats, but in this one we're in the classroom. June talks a lot, you know, there's a lot of delay before she points to each card, and the cards are all over the place. Again, there are also cards that don't relate to what he's got. He's got to manage 3 cards at this point, which is quite complicated and requires a lot of attention. You can see he really pays very close attention to what June is doing throughout the period. It's quite a long lesson. So we feel like we've made some really good progress in this area with this activity.
呢個咧，咁另外譬如話，我哋都會用醫生咧就會用就係話聽筒啦，去幫病人咧聽下佢嘅心跳嘅喎。係啊，聽嗰個好緊要。
We also worked on him listening, not just watching, and we had a program we developed called Secret Word. He needs to listen to what the teacher says, and when the teacher says something, he needs to do something. So in the first phase, at the beginning of the week, we're teaching him to ring a bell when the teacher says a certain word.
大嘅飛機，好細嘅小巴，好長嘅的士，有黃色嘅的士， 有好誇張嘅小筆。
You can see by the end of the week, it's within the context of a story time, right? Which is good. This is a common kind of everyday activity in a school. And he's got a piece of paper and now he's not ringing a bell. He's got two things he needs to listen to now. So two secret words. One is turtle and the other is another animal.
咁咧原來咧佢兩個咧好好朋友㗎，住喺隔離嘅喎。咁但係咧有一日咧，阿蝸牛咧就同烏龜講：我要搬啦，我咧屋企咧太細啦。咁所以我就預備執嘢，我要走啦。咁跟住咧，阿烏龜咧就唔開心啦。
Descriptions that June is now using is really in story format, so it's not so isolated, much more difficult, and he has to put a tick whenever he hears the words for those two animals. The activity is much longer and much more repetition of those words being used, but again he listens very nicely. Another activity we did for his attending is treasure hunt. So you can see here June is going to go hide something, the thing she's holding in her hand, and he needs to really watch her very carefully to see where is she going to put it. So if he's not watching all the time, then she's going to put it somewhere and he's not going to know where to go find it. So it really requires a lot of sustained attention, and we're in the big area at our office. It's quite noisy there, a lot of kids running around.
有冇留心啊？好啦，我俾3秒鐘你去揾翻佢個空氣，預備，我收埋咗喺邊。
It's quite a distracting environment. We also wanted to work on the Zoom situation. If you remember, he wasn't doing so well with that, wasn't really engaging with that. And so we wanted to see if we could start with just teaching him to stay in the chair and not run all over the room, and to see what kind of, impact that would have. And this is the first day.
仲有咧毛巾，希望咧俾一個貼士你，有坐定定，冇周圍走，仲記得有坐好喎。好，繼續。咁咧。執完晒啲嘢之後咧，佢就跑。有啲小朋友咧，就喺度俾個貼士你啊，仲坐定定聽老師上堂咧仔。
By the end of the week, we faded out the tokens, we faded out our presents, and he was actually able to do a whole 30-minute lesson with the school independently without us being in the room, which we were really happy about.
等我問下小朋友先，頭先嗰個小男孩咧買咗啲咩㗎？有冇小朋友可以舉手話俾我知佢買咗啲咩啊？等我請蘇啊。
So if you remember, the food was also a kind of staying on task and sort of paying attention to getting things done task, which he'd had a lot of difficulty with. We started with this task, thought we'd have a timer. So we taught him about the timer, and basically you got to press stop before the timer gets to the end.
時間到嘅時候，個碗入邊可唔可以有嘢剩㗎？唔可以。但係唔可以有嘢剩，個未開始住，我再嚟講。係啊，唔可以有嘢剩嘅喎，準備，你自己筆，1、2、3，開始，加油！
And we gave him a very small amount of food to eat in a bowl, and basically asked him to try to finish eating before the timer ran out. And in the beginning, it was a really small amount of food and the timer was quite long, but he picked this up very quickly.
嚟夠鐘啦！睇下先，夠鐘喎！食晒啲西蘭花同埋魚未啊？贏咗！
By the end of the week, he was able to finish his meal in pretty much like 20-25 minutes. We increased the time on the timer because we didn't want him to be like eating too quickly. General pace, relax. Didn't have to be, we're not looking for him to really be super quick. And we also wanted to make sure by the end of the week that we weren't there, that he would be able to do that independently and under his own steam. We still have a few things to revise, like I'd like to get rid of the timer and just kind of really more naturalize this. We were very happy with where we got to on the last day.